Hey Alan, how's it going?
Hey, Ali. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, welcome back. It looks like people are just loading in right now. But hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AccuColor webinar series. Today we have Alan Demopoulos back for his second webinar. Earlier in the year, he had part one. It was creating a stylized 3D character in Cinema 4D Lite. Today we have carryover session from that. We're gonna dive in a little deeper. It's going to be creating an isometric environment in Cinema 4D Lite. Alan's going to take questions throughout the webinar, so feel free to send them in chat. If you have anything else you'd like to discuss, we will have Q&A at the end of the webinar, so stick around and welcome everyone, and welcome Alan.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining me, joining us here. And as Ali said, uh, I'm Alan Demopoulos. I'm a freelance motion designer based in the Houston, Texas area. And today we're talking about Cinema 4D, Cinema 4D Lite to be specific. If you are an After Effects user, Adobe After Effects, or you have Adobe Creative Cloud, you might not know that there's a really powerful 3D program that comes in free with that software by the way of Cinema 4D Lite. And inside Cinema 4D Lite, you can do crazy things like, text generation. You can create several primitives to make the building blocks of a scene. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about here. We're talking about isometric rooms. If you've spent any time on Instagram or uh, anywhere on the internet, basically you'll see a lot of these basically cutout room diorama type of scenes of rooms. And you might wonder to yourself, how do I go about creating something like that? Well, you have all the tools inside of Cinema 4D Lite to create that, and we're going to cover a few of them here. So this is, I guess, first and foremost, when you install After Effects, you have the option to install Cinema 4D Lite as well. And when you do, you have inside of After Effects, you can create. In fact, let me see if I can I share. Well, inside of After Effects, you have an option to create a brand new Cinema 4D scene. And once you open or import that into After Effects, you can double click on it and it'll open up Cinema 4D Lite. So this is the scene file that we'll be using as reference here. I made this probably in maybe 4 or 5 hours, just with some basic tools that are inside of Cinema 4D Lite. So this one is kind of the basis of what we've been talking about here. There's a couple of different tools and generators, things of that nature that will be used to create this. So first of all, here inside the viewport, we've got, this is the largest part of the screen, of course, and this is where you'll see the geometry. And if you look over here on the right-hand side, we've got the object manager, and this is where all the items inside of your scene live. And one of them is the camera. So if you click on it, you can see that we've got these attributes down here, and this is all the properties that make up this particular object. And this will change depending on what you click on. So here's the floor rug. Notice that we've got different properties here. We can actually scale this up. We can scale this down. But the one we're interested in at the moment is called is the camera. And under the camera object tab, we've got this projection here, and it's a list, and it basically allows you to switch through different kind of views. So what we're used to seeing in the real world is a perspective view. And so this is something that we can actually, orbit around, and we've got perspective here. So if you, take these lines of the wall, for instance, or these slats here and follow them out, they'll all go to a vanishing point. Well, that's not the case with isometric views. Isometric views, if we switch it over, if we go back to projection and switch it to isometric, you can see that we have all of these parallel lines that never ever converge. That's kind of the one of the main characteristics about isometric views, is that those parallel lines never converge. So you just get rid of all the perspective, and it's kind of a cool look. So let's switch back over to perspective. Well, sorry, rather than switching back over to perspective, we can turn off this camera icon, and it'll snap us into kind of like a God view, a world view, that lets you, you can easily toggle back on and off where you are. And I'm hitting these shortcut keys so we can kind of see wireframes and kind of a clean view here. So you can do this, not to get sidetracked, but here under display, you have the option here to switch from grouch shading to grouch shading with lines. And this is something that'll just help you kind of gauge the density of the meshes and see if it's something too heavy. Like if you turn this on and you see nothing but black, generally it means that your mesh is way too dense. But that's just to give you an idea of what some of this geometry looks like under the hood, so to speak. So let's turn this off the camera and let's examine the first kind of staple of modeling inside of Cinema 4D. And that's just basic box modeling primitives, right? So you've got like this list of primitives here that allow you to start off with base forms. So in our case, this is an isometric view, and this is going to be essentially a cube, kind of a hollowed out cube, right? One of the cool things about Cinema 4D is that it allows you to open up a brand new scene file. So you can start off from scratch, and I'm just going to use this. I'm going to toggle back and forth between these two scenes. So we can use this as kind of a reference, and then we'll do our building and stuff inside here. So you can kind of follow from scratch. Disregard this. This is part of my startup file. You can actually tell Cinema 4D to save off a state of your file if you like. I like my camera in a certain angle, or I like my scene to always have a cube in it. If you're a Blender user, you might save that off as a scene file, and every time you create a new scene, those properties will show up.
Hey,
hi.
Hey, I just sent everyone in the chat the file so that
Perfect.
Cinema 4D Lite, if you want to just tell them about that.
So yeah, we've got a file. If you want to follow along at home, the link is in the chat room, the chat window, and it's basically this entire scene here. So it'll open up in Cinema 4D Lite. I believe if you double click on it, whether you're on Mac or PC, it should open up Cinema 4D Lite. Obviously, you have to have it installed first, so go through that step and that process. But once you do, you should see all of this, and you should be able to follow along. So if you have any questions after the fact, and you're looking through this, which part of the reason why I wanted to furnish the file is so that everybody can dive in and kind of dissect what's going on under the hood. And if you have any questions after the seminar webinar, feel free to reach out to me via email or my website, which I guess we can link towards the end. But yeah,
another question now.
Yes.
Doug wants to know, will this file open in the regular Cinema 4D?
That's a great question. Yes, absolutely. Yes, it will. So Cinema 4D Lite, it works a little backwards, works a little differently if you have a scene that's built in the full version of Cinema 4D and you try to open up in Cinema 4D Lite. I believe it's the same installation, and all it is the servers checking to see which version or license you have if you're subscribed. And if you don't have the full version and it opens up in Cinema 4D Lite, that's all the bells and whistles that don't come with Cinema 4D Lite will basically be disabled, and you'll get all these little error messages saying, hey, this thing's not installed, or this thing's not installed. But yes, going the other way, Cinema 4D Lite, opening it up inside full version of Cinema 4D, no problem. All right, let's open up, here's our blank scene file. So the first thing you don't want to do is basically come over here and create a primitive. So this is a cube, this is the basis for our thing. So what's nice about this is that once you drop it into the middle of the scene, you have this object property panel, the attribute panel, attribute manager. And here under the object tab, you can always alter this. This is kind of live or parametric, as they say. So this is one way to keep things kind of non-destructive, right? Procedural. And with these segments, you can also go through here and start to adjust these, which you're not really seeing. If you come over here to display, grouch shading with lines, you'll see that we have lines here now. And depending on where you set this, you can slice up or subdivide this cube into a grid of 5 by 5 by 5. We don't necessarily need this. Right now, what we're going to do is just use this as a reference. So I'm going to set this all back to 1 by 1 by 1. And then what I'll do is I'll copy this and make an instance, or not instance, but a copy of this. And then this green check mark allows you to turn off the cube, essentially, disabling it from the screen. Although that's not entirely true because you get these little traffic lights. And this is another convention of Cinema 4D. So this green check mark basically says, all right, hey, Cinema, calculate this, like work on this, show me this. But this display flag, essentially these stoplights, you've got green, which says no matter what, always display. And if it's red, it means never display. And you got two of them. And you're asking yourself, well, what's the difference? Well, the top one is just for the viewport. So viewport is what we see here inside of Cinema. The bottom one is actually the renderer. So if you want to, why this would come in handy basically is, you would want to reference something while you're building, while you're working, but you don't want to have it render in the final picture. That's where you would want to show one in the viewport and then hide it. I said it backwards. That's where you would want to hide it in the, show it in the viewport, hide it in the render. So yeah, you can actually, over here under basic, you can see it right here, viewport visibility, render visibility. So generally it's set to default on both. And if you explicitly don't want to see this, just click on this X or just say off. And then now when you turn on the green check mark, it still won't show because this visibility. All right, so I want to use this as my cube. This is our room reference. I'll rename this reference. And then for this cube, what I'm going to do is I'll use these yellow handles here, which allow you to alter basically the properties of this object tab, but it's interactive. It's right here in the viewport. So you could do it here numerically, or you could do it with these handles. And that's kind of the cool thing about Cinema. There's several different places where you'll see interactive handles that allow you to manipulate some of this geometry rather than having to, go through here and mess with sliders and such. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit like this, just to get some thickness for this wall. And then I'm going to turn on my room reference, and then we'll just take this cube and we'll rename this wall. And then I'm going to use this arrow here to drive it back. And we can actually do one more thing. We can take this wall object, and then if we hold down Control or Command on a Mac, you can click and drag on the handles here to create a copy. And if you hit R, you can get this rotation gizmo, and that allows you to rotate this thing. And if you grab the handles, or right in the middle, you can do this free rotation thing. But these green, red, and blue handles are really handy at letting you, rotate this thing interactively inside the viewport. And one thing too, Cinema4D, like if you notice as I'm dragging this, you want that extra precision. You want to have it lock on to 90 degrees or whatever. If you hold down Shift, you can start moving in like 5-degree increments. So somewhere in there. And this is our our 4-up view, which shows you orthographic views. So you get a top view, a bottom view, or whatever you want. Some people like to work this way. Other people like to just stick in perspective and just move around. I guess for something like this, you might want that accuracy. So I'll just hit the middle mouse button, and I'll notice that my top, this guy's not very centered or rotated right. So let's come over here, select that wall, and hit coordinates. And now we can actually get a whole number in there, nice and neat. And then while we're here, let's rotate, or not rotate, but move this back and then place it kind of in there. So there's the beginnings of our wall. One other way that you could do this is, you could take a third one to put down a floor, but you have some basic, real basic editing capabilities when you make this thing editable. And editable means that you're just going to remove all of these properties here and manipulate just the geometry, the points, the edges, the faces. And to do that, you can hit the letter C on the keyboard. And now you notice this icon changes to this, it's no longer a cube. It's got this triangle with a couple dots on it. Or you can just right click and just say, make editable down there. Well, that's great because I've already done it. Let's undo that and then make it editable. There it is. And so now you can go into the kind of like this sub object mode. So you got your points. If I come over here to this rectangle selection, I can select it. And now instead of selecting the whole object, I'm actually selecting the components of this geometry, and I can move this around if I want it. So now there's the points. Here's the edges. You can select an edge and move this around. And of course, you can do faces as well. So that's one other way. This is kind of the destructive way. So now notice that, when you come back into your room this object, there's no longer that object tab. So just be aware of that. There's pros and cons for doing both. but I try to generally try to keep everything live as much as possible for as long as possible, until I need to, get down and dirty and do something like this, where we select these three faces and just delete them. And now we've got the flat version of this room. So this has the thickness, and there's our floor. So this kind of two approaches that you could use to create the basis of the room. Let's get into some more exciting stuff, like these building modeling this floor, for instance. Like this floor might be a little bit overkill here, but I'm just going to breeze through and just give you kind of a high level quick tour of what this thing can do and how it's made. Essentially, this is using something called a fracture object inside of Cinema 4D. You have this fracture object right here. And Cinema 4D has a great MoGraph system, motion graphic system, that allows you to manipulate multiple copies of objects in procedural ways. So instead of having to place these floor tiles, one by one, I'm actually able to manipulate this and copy them using a cloner. Now, the cloner that exists in Cinema 4, the full version of Cinema 4D. What we have here available to us in the MoGraph tools is something called fracture. So let's just go through and take a look at what that entails. Let's just make a new scene. And here's my camera that I need to delete. So here for the floor, what I'll do is I'll just come over here and make a small rectangle, something like so. And while we don't have the cloner is a really powerful, it's a procedural way, as I mentioned, to make a bunch of copies of things, a bunch of copies of objects, and manipulate them in procedural ways. Since we don't necessarily have that here, we have the fracture object, which can kind of get us there halfway. We'll need to build up the floor tiles in a different way. So what I'll do here is come over to tools, and what we have here is the duplicate. And we can duplicate this selected object. Maybe we want 8 copies, or we want 9 copies, or we want 10 copies. Let's just say 10. And instead of copies, I'm going to say an instance. And you're asking yourself, well, what's the difference? Well, copies, once we commit to this and we make our little grid, right? If we wanted to change all of them, we have to do so. Like if we wanted the rectangles to be triangles, you would have to go through each of those planks and manipulate each one of those planks separately. Whereas if you say instance, all you got to do is select one of them, and all the other ones that reference that main one will follow along. So, and it's also lighter on geometry too. So, or lighter on your resources. So generally, if you can, try to select instance, because it's just faster that way. So here we have linear. And so this is kind of what the cloner does. It takes it and makes copies, right? I don't want it going up in the y-axis. I actually want these going across this way. So something like so. And now that we've done that, we can actually go through and say a new transform, and it's going to make copies of these copies, I believe. Or actually, we can just do this. See how we've Cinema 4D's made these little instances. And these are the copies that I was talking about. So instead of having to change every one of these individually, I can just go reference this main one here. And now if I say size, you'll notice how all of them are changing. So it's just a real economical way to get clones going, instances. All right, so that's one way that we can take these copies, and then we'll just duplicate this even further, selecting this top one. Oh, and that's one of the other kind of one of the other main properties of this object manager is that you can make things hierarchies, make children and parent relationships. So because these individual cubes, we can move these guys individually, right? But if we want to move them as a group, well, if you stash all of these cubes underneath what's called a null, and you can make as many nulls as you want, you can start to take one of these guys and put them underneath others. And now all these cube copies, all these childrens of cubes are now parented, what's called parenting, to the cube copies. And that is parented to this null. So whatever happens to the top one happens to everything, except of course this cube guy who's left behind. So that's really, parenting is a really another powerful way to get things going. So I'm going to select this cube copies and just draw this out. In fact, we can pull this cube off since we don't really need to see him. Something like so. All right, so now we have all these copies, right? So what we can do now is use the fracture object to do a little bit more granular control. So let's take this fracture object here and add it to our scene. And then we'll take all of our hierarchy, our tiles here, and make it a child of the fracture object. Oops. Let's do some rearranging there. Okay, so now you can see that everything is underneath this fracture object. And what's cool is that we have these things called effectors. And if we select the fracture object, we have this space here down for effectors. And the effectors are the kind of the global big major brushstrokes that you can use to manipulate the clones individually. So the idea is that we don't want to have to, manipulate clones on, an individual level. We want to use big brushstrokes to control it. And that's what these effectors do. So under the MoGraph menu, we have effector, and one of the basic ones is called the plane effector. And all we have to do is just click on that, and you'll notice that they all jump because that's plane effector comes with a default value of 100 centimeters. So you know that, hey, something's happened and we're changing it. So with one slider, we're actually pushing up all these clones. So let's do this. Let's push them up just a little bit. Let's actually add some slight rotation. You notice that we're rotating all of the kind of like, I guess they would be rows, or is that columns? Just depends on how you look at it. Let's take our fracture object and tell it to work on the object mode of explode segments. And now you can see that instead of working on the hierarchy as like, it looks at this as one whole object, this as one whole object, and this as one whole object. We're telling it now in the explode segments mode to look at all the objects individually. And so that's why you start to see this rotation happening. So let's go through, and in the plane effector, we'll go to our parameter, and we're adding a little bit of rotation, right? And maybe we add something slightly, just so that they're slightly off. But now what we can do is, this is kind of another big feature that the full, well, Cinema4D Lite has it as well, but like in the full version of Cinema4D, it goes even crazier. We have something called fields. So we've applied this plane effector across all these clones, but now we want to say, I want to localize it just to a certain area. So if you're thinking like Photoshop with masks, that's kind of the same thing of what's happening here. We're kind of limiting, we're telling Cinema4D to do this plane effector thing, but only localize it to the area that I want. And that area can look a couple different ways. We have these different fields. So if we say box field, you'll see we have a brand new gizmo inside of our viewport. In this box field, we can actually move around, and you can start to see how this system is whatever's inside this box is going to be affected by our plane effector. And this is one of the most powerful things about cinema, is that this allows you to very easily and quickly manipulate some of this geometry without having to do a whole bunch of setup for something more complicated. Underneath the hood, it's definitely complicated, but like right here, we only have like a handful of objects, and we're using just one box field in order to create this this effect here. So that's how I basically used Cinema4D cloners to create this bottom part right here and add a little bit of offset. So inside the full-blown version of Cinema4D, there's tons more effectors and a bunch more of these green generator objects, these MoGraph components that allow you to do even crazier stuff. Let's get into some of the more basic, some of the other tools here, like, let's see. Over here on this right-hand side, we've got this column of tools, essentially. So some of these will drop down, and you have generators. You've got these splines, like this blue icon here. This will allow you to generate splines. And from that, when you use this in combination with some of these other objects here, like the loft and sweep objects, you can build up more geometry that way. So let's take a look at that next. And so this is kind of how I built out this part of that lamp. let's look at I guess we can use this to see how we created the this stool and also these curtains here. Let's go into a brand new scene. And to show off some of these splines and basically how you can use this as building blocks for creating 3D geometry, let's go through and create, well, here, let's do a wavy thing. Let's create those curtains real quick. I'm going to create what's called an end side. And right now it's got just 6 sides to it to create a hexagon, but I'm going to bring this down to 2. And now we just got a straight line. And then what we can do is under intermediate points, right now it just has 2 points, right? This beginning and an end. But in between that beginning and end, we can have as many points as we want. These intermediate points, they're kind of invisible and under the hood. But if we make this editable now, right now I've got 64. So if we right click on this and say make editable, you should see now if we go into point mode that we have more. Do we not? Did I lie? I lied. We'll go back. We'll undo. It's kind of beside the point because what we're going to do is now we're going to take this. We'll need this extra geometry in here to create the wavy patterns of the curtain. So how do we make the waves? Well, in Cinema 4D, we've got these things called deformers, these purple guys. And this, we have something called wind. And if we add this into our scene, nothing's happening just yet until we make it a child of the object that we want to affect. And that's kind of the thing with these deformers. The purple ones, it's kind of color coded so that you know, hey, purple should go underneath something as a child of another object in order to use it to affect something. So here's where this uniform thing kind of comes in. So right now we have the object size. It was set to 2 sides. Well, with 2, you don't have any extra geometry in there to tell Cinema 4D, hey, I want this to, now become wind-like or be affected by this wind deformer. So that's where you turn this from, I guess by default, it starts with adaptive. And if you say uniform, it'll just throw in an equal number of points evenly distributed across this entire end side object. So I just say 64 just because it won't get crunchy when we start to tweak out our wind deformer. So here's our wind deformer, and this actually animates too. So this is kind of the cool thing about this deformer and many deformers inside of Cinema. I haven't set any keyframes in this. We haven't animated anything just yet. And here it is moving, and that's kind of the default behavior for this. And in our case, we're not going to have it animate for the curtains. I guess you could use it to animate if the window is open in the scene. So you could use it to animate these curtains, but there's just with many things inside of Cinema 4D, there's more than one way to attack a problem or recreate an effect. In this case, I'm not going to animate it. I'm going to just use the amplitude. I'll lower this down, and I'm going to introduce more, not the size, but the frequency, I believe. Oh, that's related to time. So if you're animating this and turn up the frequency, that's just going to do this undulation motion really, really fast or really, really slow. So in this case, I'm going to turn this down to 0, and I'm going to decrease the amplitude. And what we want is have more kind of rippling effect, right? But it's doing this weird. I mean, there's a lot of randomness to this. And that's because we have this turbulence set up to 50%. If you dial this back down to 0, we should have something that looks more uniform. If you turn off the flag option will actually, if you move this deformer over to one section, it's going to move everything. Like you could use this to put this onto like a plane object and have it move on every place except the very end. So it does the effect like it says. It's kind of a flag object. But here, in this case, if I turn it off, now you can start to see we're getting the basis of our curtains shape, right? So by playing with this, you can, because this is non-destructive, I can go through here and change this after the fact. But this is only one component, right? We need a second component in order to generate geometry. Right now, if this is just a spline. It doesn't render, it doesn't make an image, it doesn't contribute at all to the image when you cook it. So the second component that you need is one of these other green generator objects, which takes the spline as an input and then does something to it to generate geometry. And the one I'm looking for is a loft. So if I take the inside object and make it a child of, or not loft, well, I guess you could do it with the loft, but there's, yeah, this one, extrude. This is kind of the cool thing about Cinema 2. You can experiment a lot and just say, hey, what does this look like inside of a loft? And right now it's nothing because lofts actually require more than one spline. So let's put this under the extrude. And now you can see that base form, the spline that we had that's being affected by the wind is now being extruded downwards. And this is just the default settings. So you can go through and tweak this out all you want. So if I select the parent, the extrude, and if I was to make this actual curtains, I'd want to raise them up so they're not standing or sitting on the floor. And then take the extrude and then pull this down. And if we go to our display ground shading with lines, you can see there's actual geometry there. So this will render out and this will, you can put textures on here. And you know, if that's basically how I created these curtains here. Now these don't move, of course, because this we're, you know, aiming for, although I guess you could, if you wanted to animate this, you could. But there are other tools in here as well in order to generate geometry based off of splines. One of them is this object right here. This vase was created by using a loft, I think. One way to do it is through a loft. It looks like maybe, oh, that's the leaf. Let's go through the vase. Yeah, the vase is created using a loft. So instead of doing the extrusion, taking the flat spline and just pushing it up in space, we're taking a spline, a profile spline, and revolving it around an axis. So real briefly, let's just look at that. Let's see what that looks like. So for this, it helps to go into your orthographic view so you can kind of get a view from the side. In this case, I'll just look at it from the front. And now if you can imagine kind of a quarter, a slice view, kind of like if you took a saw, cut the vase in half and looked at its profile, that's what you would see. That's what we want to try to generate. So you could go through here and generate, you know, these building blocks of splines, or you can go through here and just draw it out yourself. You can use the sketch tool to create a spline. In fact, if you just click and drag, you can start creating this line, and that looks absolutely horrid. But the cool thing is, because it's an editable object, you can now go through and start to tweak this thing with a couple tools here, like the spline smooth. You can actually draw this out, drag this around, and depending on how intense you want that strength to affect, you know, you might want something a little bit more subtle. So you can also go through here, and because these are splines, you can also go through and just do your regular rectangle selection and select everything and just hit the transform button or the scale button and just start to manipulate these points this way too. So this is kind of the basis of a really ugly looking vase. Let's switch back over to the perspective view. And yeah, so to generate geometry with this now, let's go through here and add in our lathe object. And because we want this spline to be a child of the lathe object, we just drag it one on top of the other, and then boom, now you've got this geometry. It doesn't have any thickness, and I don't think Cinema4D Lite has the version. There's a thicken generator that basically allows you to take flat sheets of paper essentially and add thickness to them. We don't have that here, but in this case, what we can do is just generate, make the top of this kind of fool the eye a little bit. We'll just take this last point and I'll hold down Control and tell it to create another point. And I'm just going to drag this down and I'm going to cheat my way through this. So I'll just drag this down all the way. And then actually, we want a little bit of a lip here, don't we? Let's go this way. There we go. So you can kind of fake the thickness here. In fact, that might kind of look kind of cool. And that's the basis of kind of this vase. Trying to be mindful of time to show you guys a little bit of everything here. So those are some of the modeling tools. I'd like to switch gears and do some basic materials, because what we have here, is basically simple geometry. I mean, these are cubes. We've got a capsule here. This character was created using splines to feed into a sweep. So you'll notice here, if I turn off this generator, we've got this one spline. Do we have solo in Cinema4D Lite? I don't think we do. In the full-blown version, we have the ability to select an object and then do a solo. So it hides everything else except that one object. So you can kind of clear the clutter and get an idea of what it is. How is this contributing to my scene? That's something I use all the time. One other thing you can do is use layers. Layers are cool. Notice that we have this color coding here for all of our objects, well, most of our objects. And you'll notice that this sweep here is yellow. So if you go to the layers panel, the yellow layer is the artist layer. That's everything that's corresponding to this character here. And if once you assign an object to a layer, you can solo that layer and it'll show you everything that is just on that layer. So this helps to, go through and really isolate down. If you have a really busy scene, I highly recommend looking into layers, using layers, because it goes a long way to helping you organize and declutter, at least in my head, what's actually contributing to the scene, how much of this is being, or helper items, things of that nature. So it's an organizational thing. But yeah, this sweep, this guy's he's created with just a handful of objects, and using those building blocks like the sweep object. So here, the sweep object, we can, this is all still live in parametric, so I can, maneuver these different properties here if I wanted his wrist to be skinnier, things like that. But yeah, let's get into some material building. So let's come back here, turn this off. So right now we've got, these different, let's look at these curtains. These curtains have a material applied to it. And in order to find your materials, you can click on this little button right here that kind of hides it. So you can toggle it back on and off when you don't need it. But this material manager shows you everything that is in your scene that has some kind of texture or procedural material applied to it. In this case, these curtains are procedural. And by procedural, it means that, it's generated inside of Cinema4D. I didn't, it's not a JPEG. I didn't use Photoshop to create it. Although I did use Photoshop to create, or I took a still image basically of my screen and added it as a texture. This is the only JPEG that's kind of in the scene, I think. No, that's not true. The wood, I believe the wood texture here is also painted inside of Cinema4D. But yeah, this rug material is a procedural material. Let's dive inside and take a look at how some of the stuff is built. So inside the material editor, you can double click on it. It'll open up in another panel, or if you single click on it, it'll open up in the attribute manager here, which is kind of where I like to look at things, just because it's saves on space essentially. But yeah, this is using a shader called tiles, and the tiles is really powerful because there's a lot of different options that you can get into to create different looks. Now, I guess I should back up. How do we even apply something like this? Apply a material. Let's go into one of our scenes here. Let's do this one. And so what we want to do is disregard this. This is for Redshift, which is part of the Cinema4D subscription if you choose to subscribe to it. But for now, in this version of Cinema4D Lite, we're using the standard materials here. So I'll just add a brand new default material. And what we can do to add this to our object is simply click on the swatch and drag it over to the object. And you'll notice that we have a brand new tag. With Cinema4D has a system of tags, which are extra functionality that's assigned to a particular object. So you can drag these tags around and put it, make them or copy them. So it's a real flexible system. Just visually, you can see, all right, what's in this extrude object? How many different materials does this have? Well, currently, it's just one. So let's tap on our material and dive into how we can create some of the patterns for that curtain. I think we were using a different material or a different shader, but basically, Cinema 4D, in this particular material, we've got different properties, right? If you go to this basic tab, we've got these different properties for what it looks like on the surface, what it looks like, or how it behaves, like its reflections. We can introduce some transparency if we wanted to, and something called bump and normal maps, which is a little beyond the scope of this. But if you want to add real crazy detail, if you're taking your the surface of your iPod case or whatever and look at it, glancing it against the light, you'll see some scratches, and those scratches you can, and maybe you've got some dents in it if you dropped it one or two more times. You can recreate those. Instead of with geometry, you can do that with surfacing or with your materials in the bump and normals. But for this, let's just go through and add in some simple color. And in this color channel, we have the ability to load up textures if we wanted to, actual materials that you find on the internet that you create off with using Photoshop, or maybe with the photos that you've taken with your phone. You can drop those in here. But I'm interested in the procedural materials that Cinema 4D allows us to create. So I'm going to go through here and add in that tiles effect that we were looking at. And right now it's popping off my screen. So we'll just do it here. Under surfaces, you have this, it's the same interface basically. Under texture, we have surfaces, and down at the bottom, we've got tiles. And we've got a whole slew of things here. So I encourage you to experiment and play with it, because it's really powerful. But just doing that, it already sets us up with a shader that is in the form or in the colors of what we have here. And if we go to patterns, we've got all of these different ways that we can create tiles. You can create lines. So this one might be one way, a cheap and easy, inexpensive way to create the floors. Instead of doing it with geometry, you might do it this way with textures. We've got brick. We've got, I think the one I used in the example is through, let's cheat. What do we do here? Let's select our curtains. And here's one thing. If you select in right now, it's like, I don't know where anything is inside of my object manager. I want to target and reveal the curtains. We'll select it inside the 3D viewport. And if you hover over the object manager and hit S, it'll take you straight to that object. And so here we have curtains, but it looks like, and if we twirl that down, then we have the actual geometry for the curtains, and we have our material tag. So we can double click that, and yep, this is with tiles, and this is with some kind of Voronoi. Oh, okay, it's random. So yeah, we've got random in there. I was thinking it's Voronoi, which is another different type of shader. But yeah, basically you can double click this, go to tiles, and with these different patterns, you can go through and select, there's a spiral. I think the one for the rug I did was circles. One of these circles, I believe, or it might be rings. It's rings. There's the rings. So that's the shader that I used to create the rug. And of course, you can go through, change out your colors, make it whatever you like. Super powerful. In fact, if you twirl down this menu here, this little icon, that arrow, you can go through and specify if you've got a certain brand hex code that you're trying to adhere to. You can do that. You can click on this to get little swatches. So maybe you keep going back to a certain group of colors. You can go through here and just simply tap on it. Or if you want to add a new one, let's just make something super green. You can take this swatch, click and drag and add it, and it'll add into a new collection, or you can add it to one of the existing ones. So real powerful system all throughout Cinema 4D. Like anytime you see a little color picker, guaranteed you'll have some option like this. And one other noteworthy one is you can, instead of picking via swatch or picking via these sliders, you can click on this little mountain picture, which is their icon for a picture, and then target an image to drop in. So this is kind of cool. So if you did a screen grab or something like that, and you want to drag in a picture, well, here's a picture of, let's drag in this picture. Let's see, is this going to do it? Is it going to show me? Yeah, there it is. This is kind of crazy, but this is a picture, a screen grab of Cinema4D, and you can actually use these icons now to kind of like pull from the photo. So it gets a little nerdy, but you can even go through here and tell it to do these little samples. You can right click, I believe it's right click, or just control click, and you can put this little notch, and wherever the notch is on the image is what color you're going to get. So plenty of handy little tips and tricks like that that make working in Cinema4D really powerful. Yeah, so surfacing, this is kind of like inside the material. This is one way that we can add detail to our geometry. And of course, you can go through and add in as many materials as you want. You can even limit, if we make this, let's do this. Let's make this editable, since we're not really saving this part, but we're boiling this down into actual individual bits and pieces of geometry, which you can then go through. Let's turn off let me turn off my textures for the moment in the viewport. And I'll turn off this work plane, because every time I orbit around, it gets in the way. I try to operate with as clean a viewport as possible, just to minimize the view clutter. But yeah, so I made it editable, and basically now what I want to do is go through, and in the face mode, I can go through here, and using my selection tool, I can start to select. I'll shift click on some random geometry, and as I'm doing this is kind of the lenticular effect. I don't know if you guys remember that, but like, you have an image, and as you rotate it one side, it has a picture, and you rotate it another side, it has a totally different picture. So this is kind of a cool way to achieve that effect. So basically, I selected all the polygons that are facing this way, right? And then I'll apply the material to just these polygons. And I have all these tags here for all the faces. I'm going to delete them, because when we dragged in here, let me just do this a little bit more cleanly so you can see, because this is kind of a cool effect. Let's do that again. I'll take my extrude. Let's clean this. Here's the polygon selection, and I'm going to add all of these. Let's make a brand new. I know I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but this is cool. Here's a brand new material. I'll take it and apply it to just those polygon selections. And now if I go through here and turn on my materials, everything that was selected should be red. And everything that's not selected is the default gray color. So let's make a blue color here. I'll just drag that, and let's just make this blue. Sure. And let's go through and double click this polygon selection tag. It retains the information. This is how this material knows to apply itself only to what's inside this material selection tag. So if we change this tag name, it's referencing the name here. This is called poly selection. Let's rename this. We'll call it red. And you'll notice that everything changes because the name changed. But we can change the selection tag for this material and say, hey, red, color red, only apply yourself to the selection called red. And that's what happens. So these two are kind of pairs, right? So what I'll do now is double click this polygon selection tag, and I'll just invert the selection here. I think you can go right click and go invert. And now everything else is selected that's not red. And we can drag our blue material and add it, and you'll see that we have another pair here. So everything that's blue is assigned to this polygon selection, which we'll call blue. I guess we didn't have to do that, but just to be thorough, right? Here we go, blue. And so now from one angle, you've got red. And if you switch over to the other angle, you've got blue. And so that's how you can start to have multiple materials on your objects. through the use of selection tags. It does require you to have an editable object. So you wouldn't be able to pull this trick off using any one of these generators, these basic primitives, essentially. I think there might be a hack around that. There used to be. I don't know if it's still possible. So I'm just going to say, yeah, go with editable objects if you want to like have more than one material on your object. So that's a little bit of materials. I'm looking at the time. Oh, we're getting close. We've got lights. We've got here. Let's just go through some of these lights real quick. So to add lights, all we have to do is click on this button here, and we have a couple of different options, like little lights like this. This is a point light, so it emanates light in all directions, and that's kind of what I have inside of this lamp here. So we can take this and, instead of having to maneuver and pull this around, I want this to live inside of here. You can actually use the, do we have it here? I don't think we have it here. We do have snapping tools, don't we? Yes, snapping up here. So we can enable snap, and I'm going to tell Cinema4D to snap only to polygons. So anything that's geometry, it'll snap to. So now when I take my light object and then use my move tool, now it's now snapping to the leaf, it's snapping to the curtain, it's snapping to the lamp. And this is kind of how we are able to get some of these window or this light here. You can change up the value for the color and make it, suitable for Halloween, right? So it's a dark orange. There you go. And lastly, let's talk about some text tools. Text tools inside of Cinema4D are really powerful. This one's a little bit, this is an intro, of course. So what you'd get is the text spline. And this is what you would use in conjunction with one of these generators like the extrude object. So I'm going to hold down Shift before I let go of this. Actually, hold down Option or Alt, and this will automatically, when I let go, it will automatically make that object as a parent of the selected object inside there. So that's one or two less clicks that you got to do. But here, we have this text spline, and we can make it say whatever we want. Let's say what, BenQ. Oops. BenQ like that. And then if we click out, now we have 3D geometry that we can actually manipulate. And what's cool about this is that you don't have to limit yourself to, messing with these sliders inside here to get this kerning right all the time. In fact, you can go through here and say, show 3D GUI. And if you twirl this down, you now have all these sliders, which correspond to these sliders here. And this is a really cool way to art direct and really get in there, and get this guy to look exactly the way you want. And with the extrude, we can pull this down and then add in some caps. So right now we have these sharp edges, razor sharp edges, which aren't going to catch any light when you add lighting. So you want little hints. So you add some geometry in there by altering the caps. So here we can add in some rounding, and now we're adding a little bit tiny bevel that will be suitable for catching little highlights there when you add lights into this. So this is really cool because it's not, again, non-destructive. Anytime you want to, you set this up, you can create a brand new object over here and, change out the text if you want it again. Dim fleas. There you go. So that's kind of how I created this text object here for this make stuff. Cinema4D is really, really powerful. There's a lot of, even in this base, entry level free tool that comes in with with After Effects, I was able to make this little diorama using the cameras inside here, using the basic building blocks for modeling, and adding in a couple lights. It's just take this. You can now take this into After Effects and treat it as footage, which is kind of cool too. So once you're happy with this, let's say we like this, you can kick into After Effects. If I can share my screen. Hopefully you're seeing After Effects now. I can drop this into a composition. And once it loads up, there's my scene file. I can tell it to render current, and because it's a layer now, I can actually go through and add in different, color correction if I wanted to. Maybe I wanted to, tweak out the levels, introduce a little bit more contrast or less contrast. It's a layer, so you can animate this and bring it in as a source to feed into After Effects. So I'm looking at the clock. I think that's our time. Do we have any questions? I'm looking through here into the webinar chat. Doug Bowman asks, if you're a student or a teacher, you can get, oh, yeah, more of a PSA. That's not necessarily a question. If you're a student or a teacher, you can get the full Max on One subscription for $10 for 6 months. That seems like a really good deal. But yeah, I think I'll land there and
Hey, Alan, can you
pause for any
zoom in
questions.
on the diorama? Zoom in on the monitor. I'm not sure if
Uh,
you showed that off.
I didn't. Here, let's do new share. Here's our diorama. Built this as a little bit of an Easter egg, folks. But yeah, this is um, the BenQ monitor that I'm working on. It's got this little cool hockey puck, which I thought would be a little bit gimmicky, but man, it has come through clutch because you can program this thing for different environments, so and different color temperatures, and also different color profiles. So if you're working on a Mac, it really does interface well with a little MacBook Pro here, and it has been really accurate, and I believe kind of a time saver in terms of being able to view a composition in different color spaces. So and then we've got this little screen bar halo, which illuminates the back wall, which is a really cool feature. So if you want ambient lighting for my setup, my desk setup is kind of similar to this in that it's up against the wall, and when I'm working at night, just to help reduce eye strain, man, it helps to have some ambient light that is bouncing off the wall. And then also here, this front lamp here just illuminates only on the desk. It doesn't emanate outwards and cause reflections off of the screen, which is pretty crazy. And that one is, when you're working late nights or needing that extra illumination for your desk space, you can do so without having any glare or any interference onto your monitor. So that thing comes in pretty clutch for me. But yeah, a little Easter egg. I thought it'd be handy. And then also here, with the little keyboard and the mouse. But yeah, this is this whole setup here inside Cinema 4D. Again, basic building blocks for creating a simple diorama and isometric view. Do we have any other questions? Oh, Doug asks, what was the puck you're talking about? So it comes included with the BenQ monitor, the PD 3420Q, and it attaches around to the back, and it's got a dial. This top dial allows you to control the brightness directly onto the monitor. So you can dial it back, dial it down, and then underneath it, it's got two or three buttons. Oh, I'd show you, but it's kind of tethered to my desk. It's got three buttons on there, user programmable buttons that you can use to change out different color spaces. So at night, I'll have one setting for a low blue light. And then during the day, I'm sitting up against windows, so it's super bright. I've got that blasted, probably 70-80% here in terms of brightness, but it also changes out the color to the P3 display. So it has that full range, full color. Yes, cool. Doug found it through the photos on the webpage. So yeah.
Yeah,
And then
Alan, on the dial, you can actually change the function of that too. You can make it control contrast or even volume. Yeah,
okay,
so it's
schooling me.
fully
Yeah,
customizable. We
I'll have to
call it the hotkey puck.
yeah, the hockey puck. Yeah, I'm just sitting here in color land. I didn't realize it can do the volume too. I'll have to do some further digging on that. Yeah, it's been a real handy addition. And then the screen bar halo that I have has another hockey puck that is like, it's got these dials so you can like change up the intensity. I don't know if you can see this. right now I'm toggling between the front light and the back light, and then this one is you can't see it. It's toggling between the two lights, the front and the back light, and then you've got this little dial here so that you can control the intensity of how bright or dark the front light and back light are. So this one is kind of cool because it's I think it's Bluetooth or it's wireless, so it talks to the you can have this sit apart from your desk or right there next to your keyboard or whatever. The other that the hockey puck for the monitor is tethered, however. But yeah, both very really cool products that I think just enhance the way that you interact with the display and have the color accuracy. Oh, that was the other big selling point, was that the color accuracy coming out of the box. It comes pre-calibrated from the factory to get the accurate color on for the display. So I think having to deal with color management or color calibrators like spiders or tools like that, I think if you don't want to invest in that like me, it comes out of the box pre-calibrated. So
Yeah, and I just sent a special offer to everyone in the chat. So if you want to get the 34-inch designer monitor like Allen's or any other option, we have 27-inch, 24-inch, or 25-inch, and 32-inch as well. Photography monitors, designer monitors. We just dropped a code in the chat, and definitely take advantage of that. It's our special promotion going on right now for exclusive to our webinar attendees and Adobe Max attendees. But yeah,
nice,
Alan,
awesome.
and I really, really appreciate you presenting again. The first one was awesome. This one was just as good. You never cease to impress us with your vast knowledge and animation like this. So
Appreciate it. Thank you.
we'll send out absolutely. We'll send out the recording to everyone. So if you missed it or if you want to rewatch the webinar, we'll send that out. And Alan, we see you again, maybe in the near future.
I'd love to be a part. Thanks for having me on this one.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Yeah, and on behalf of BenQ, thank you, Alan. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Everybody have a great night.
Thanks, Ali. Take care. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.